Welcome to Boswell Book Company's virtual event series. It is day 4,359 of us being in business. And we are so honored to welcome Anuradha Rajurkar for her book, American Betiya. For tonight's event, we are going to be joined by the New York Times bestselling author, Lauren Fox, the author of Send for Me. I hope I got that right. I froze and I'm like, where is the name of Laura? Because she knows I sometimes get the title wrong. Before I bring it over to Lauren, I just have to say there's been a lot of love for this book at Boswell. I'm just gonna very quickly, who doesn't want a little love? So I'm gonna just read a little tiny excerpt from Parker Jensen's recommendation, one of our booksellers. I was astounded by the ways in which Rajurkar was able to layer so much so seamlessly into the story. But the shining star of this book is our protagonist, Rani. Torn between expectations and desires, she's a character I'll not soon forget, nor will I forget the lessons she learned on her journey into young adulthood. This book is significant for its portrayal of a young girl trying to figure out where to center herself in the world, and I cannot wait to thrust it into the hands of everyone and anyone looking for their next favorite thing. Thank you both so much for coming tonight. I'm going to pass the baton to Lauren Fox.
Yay. Oh, I'm so thrilled to be here. I have a little introduction planned and I have to read it because I'm a dork and because I have to, otherwise I might start crying. So that's a great way to start, isn't it? I've known Annie for about 15 years. Our kids were in a play group together when they were tiny, and I remember so wanting to talk to this cool, interesting woman, but she had 2 toddlers attached to her, and I had one who was busy on the other side of the room destroying property. So I had to be content with admiring her from afar for a while until our kids got a little bit older, and Annie and I finally had the opportunity to say a few uninterrupted sentences to each other. Early on in our friendship, we secretly confessed to each other that we were both writers, or rather, we were both overwhelmed, exhausted people who were trying to write. I was in a small writing group at the time and I invited her to join us. The first thing she brought to be workshopped was a vivid short story about a teenage girl from a South Asian family and her white boyfriend, and their intense romance that is brought down by the young man's shocking act of cultural fetishization. Our writing group was floored. We immediately recognized that there was something unusual and special about this story. I remember that the consensus among our members was, Annie, this needs to be a novel. Fast forward a decade and a half, and here we are. Okay, I suppose you can't really fast forward through a decade and a half of dedication and hard work and frustration and delight and writing and editing and revising and more writing and more revising. But here we are. American Betiya is the extraordinary novel that grew out of the seed of that long ago short story. I couldn't be more thrilled or proud to be the one who gets to talk to Annie about it tonight. So Annie, let's start, if you would, with you telling us just briefly what the book is about and by reading a short passage from the novel. And after that, you and I will chat about it and I'll moderate questions from your fans.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Lauren. I'm pretty amazed that I'm so far, my tears are staying, at bay for now, but that was a beautiful intro. Thank you so much. So thank you guys all for being here. This is really surreal and it's lovely to see just how many people from different time periods in my life are here tonight, and it means so much to me. So thank you. So American Betiya is a cross-cultural love story that follows 18-year-old Rani, who gets swept into the euphoria of first love when she first meets Oliver. But it is the challenges that they encounter as an interracial couple that allow her to recognize real love for what it is. The book explores cultural taboos, family boundaries, and betrayal based in cultural identity. It also has a lot of desi food. So if you guys love Indian food, sex positivity, funny best friend banter, intergenerational experiences, and a revealing trip to India. What was it that you wanted to do next, Lauren? Oh, shall I read from the first page? Okay.
Yeah.
I am going to read you guys just page 1. And by the way, the very first line of the book never did change. Over all those revisions and all that rewriting, this was always my first line. He's my mother's worst nightmare. His intricate tattoos and the way he's been covertly studying me from across the gallery would give her palpitations for sure. Dude does need some manners, I think, as he stashes away several damaged portfolio sleeves before glancing over again. Avoiding his gaze, I turn to arrange my glossy artist's statement cards. Seriously, who is this guy? I take a long swig from my water bottle and attempt to refocus. It's my first ever gallery night opening, and I'm still in shock that I was invited. My photographs, the ones I took with my grandfather in India last summer, pop against the burgundy walls. Artwork is hung floor to ceiling, and modern sculptures on pedestals are strategically placed and uplit like deities. I submitted my photos to the student art show on a whim, and amazingly, they were chosen. Framed, polished, and practically art, they're gleaming images of India that I can't stop looking at, despite having seen them 1,000 times before. Across the room, the guy's eyes flicker to me again, and I flush when he catches me looking. I pretend to study a nearby sculpture. If only I could lurk behind my camera lens, I'd avoid all this nonsense. I need to recenter. I am calm. I am confident. I am legit. A fresh stream of gallery goers comes pouring through the double doors, and I brace myself, flashing my brightest smile. Some of them I know a little too well. Close family friends I call my auntie uncles spill in like a wedding barat, minus the horse. A sight in the prim atmosphere, a crowd blinged out in jewel-toned saris and yellow gold. They're Indian Standard Time late, but quickly make themselves at home. Calling my name, they come barreling into my corner, the aunties shrieking as they kiss and hug me, the uncles raising their glasses in a toast, having already somehow descended upon the nearby refreshments. Eyes flicker to us, some shining in wonder, drinking in the scene, and others bemused, like we're a comedy. I love these guys, but God. Page 1.
That's so wonderful. And I kind of am sad that you stopped reading because I could listen to you for the rest of this. And I want to start with a different question, but I just want to say that's such a brilliant opening. And I don't want to, I'll be really careful about giving away spoilers, but it is so, you did such a beautiful job of like framing the book with the opening and the final scene. They're sort of, they echo each other, and it's so beautifully done. Maybe I will start with my first question about the opening scene since you just read it. I love the opening scene at Gallery Night where Ronnie meets Oliver, because it's almost like a microcosm of the whole book, with Ronnie's family and her mixture of love and embarrassment and all of the tension of Oliver's presence. In the next page or so, she meets the boyfriend slash antagonist of the book, Oliver. It feels like the perfect setup. Can you talk about that? What your thinking was as you were writing that scene, how you built those tensions into such a condensed space? Were you trying to do that, or was it more of a happy accident? I know I just asked you like 6 questions, so you can just pick one.
No, it's okay. It's a great question, actually. I wanted to kick the story off with something really buzzy and really fun and really visual. And, Rani is a character who has always been a really good Betiya. Betiya is a term of endearment that means daughter in Hindi. So she's always kind of played it, not exactly safe, but she's, she wants to become a doctor, and she is really great with the kids in her South Asian community. She's always like volunteering her time to be with them and play with them. And she's very much supported by that South Asian community in ways that serve her really well. But there are other aspects to her personality, and one of them is art. And it's something that her parents don't necessarily get. They're not against it necessarily, but it's a part of her that hasn't really been explored much. She learned about photography through her grandfather in India, actually. And so the art does connect with her cultural heritage in a sense, but it's not, art in general is not something her family supports. So I wanted something where she would meet Oliver, but also Oliver would sort of see her family, and that juxtaposition of he's got his crowd of friends and sort of the creative, artistic kids at their school. But she's got this very strong, wonderful family that shows up for her. They're not truly aunts and uncles, they're actually family friends, but they do serve as family. And so there was an element for him of being sort of just being able to see that, from a cultural standpoint, but also a family standpoint. That's something that he's kind of missing in his life. So I wanted to bring all these different things together, and it ended up working really well in a scene that I just kind of love and is a fun way to kick off the story.
And I love that it kind of encapsulates much of the tension that like unfolds throughout the book. And I also love that we can see so vividly Ronnie's like adoration for this extended family and her discomfort, and it's so perfect. It's like the tension in the book doesn't come from how her family treats her so much as it comes from her relationship to the tight-knit family and their expectations. And it just so beautifully, like in such a condensed scene, it just comes through so beautifully. And then this like Oliver character comes like barreling through and just kind of creates chaos. So
Exactly. In the end of the scene, she notices that her mother notices Oliver looking at her. And so, it's like this moment of the mother kind of gives her a warning look, and Oliver sort of asks her, do you want to have this date? And, she's got sort of her mother there, and she has to make the decision. And in the end, she chooses yes, that I'm going to actually break away on some level from my family's expectations, and throw caution to the wind over the fact that they forbid me to date, because they want me to stay focused on my studies and my future.
And this all happens in the first couple pages, and then like the rest of the 350 pages are just like this nuanced, fascinating exploration of it. So we'll come back to all of these tensions and like intimate problems in the book. But would you like to talk about one of the things that's most interesting to me, maybe partly because I was with you for this long journey, but I just it's so cool and amazing to me that it grew from a short story to a novel. So would you like to talk about how like that process and how it grew from this little seed into something so much bigger? Like, how did you decide to expand it? What were your fears and concerns? And what were like the pleasures of turning that story into this novel?
Oh, I know. I love this question because I, at the time, had really little kids, as Lauren said, and I'd always wanted to write a book, especially for young adults, because when I was a young adult, the books I read were so impactful, and to the point where I felt like this is what I want to do one day, is impact kids the way I'm being impacted. And but the thought of writing a book, and it just felt so overwhelming, and especially with young kids at home who were close in age and wonderful, but very active, two young boys. And we had just moved to Milwaukee and we didn't know anybody. And I just thought, I started to just get from the library. We lived right across the street from the library. And so I would go over there every day and get new short stories. And so I started to get kind of obsessed with short stories. I fell in love with Alice Munro as a short story writer, and because she writes about nuances of relationships and a lot of interpersonal stuff, and it just felt like this is the kind of book I want to write one day, or at least this is what I want my writing to feel like one day. So I started the short story, and her short stories are quite long. They're like maybe 20-30 pages. So I thought, okay, that's something I think I can handle. But really, I had always dreamed of writing a book. I just didn't know that I completely believed in myself or felt like it was something I could really do, even though I had read, I was a voracious, I loved reading, and I'd always read so much growing up. And it was actually you, Lauren, who, when I said, I don't know if I know how to write, write a book, after we had that meeting and you guys were like, yes, go forward, write a book out of this short story. It just felt like, and my thought was, gosh, I don't know how to do that. And your response was, well, but you read books, so you do know how. And it was such a freeing moment. And it really was a pivotal moment for me as a writer, because it felt like, okay, I don't have to, go back to school, and I don't have to read all these, I don't have to start over, like start a new career. I was a teacher and I really loved teaching. I had left teaching for a while to raise my kids when they were little. But that was a really freeing idea, that I could just begin. And that is what I did. It was it was actually a beautiful experience. I felt like the writing, even though it took so many years to write this book, I know I shouldn't be embarrassed because I know every journey is different, but sometimes I do feel like embarrassed to say how long it took me to write this one book. But on the other hand, I am really grateful for it because it was such an escape for me. I loved being a stay-at-home mom, but I also missed teaching. I missed working. I missed kind of using my brain in that way. And writing was that for me, to be able to. I'm actually in my closet. This is my writing hole, I guess you could call it. And it's part of my bedroom, but it is really quiet in here. And usually people, especially when the kids were little, they didn't like necessarily know where I was. It's just, I was just, so they could just, I don't know, it was just such a nice little spot. So yeah, the writing, turning this into a novel was a joy in many ways. I do feel like it wouldn't have been a horrible idea to be a little bit more aware of conventions. Like, how long are YA novels usually? They're not usually 166,000 words, which is what this ended up being, which is literally twice the size of a normal YA novel. So that
But
was
it's not, it didn't end up, it's not 166. I think most people who aren't writers don't know word count versus page count. 166,000 words would have been like a 500-page novel. It's not like you cut
Oh
it.
yeah, no, I mean, it was like, I recognize when I finally started to, when I finished it, the first draft of it anyway, I finally started to research, okay, how long is a YA now? I had a sense that it was pretty long, just because I had been writing it for so long. But when I saw that, around 85,000 is kind of the top most level size, for a YA novel, my heart really sank because I was like, oh,
Remember?
awesome, I have to cut out half of this book. And so, and again, my writing group, Lauren, and the rest of my writing group members were so amazing. And first of all, so patient in reading the same single book for all those years that we were meeting. So they deserve a medal for that alone. But more than that, it was just, that recognition that I need to remove, subplots. I need to really streamline the language. It was that part was pretty painful, but I ended up, I think it was Lauren or somebody in our writing group mentioned that, when you delete a scene, just put it into a deleted scenes file. So you're not literally throwing it into the garbage. It's just in your deleted scenes file. And that was actually really helpful. And
It's
the
like how
funny
you
thing,
trick yourself into
you
thinking
trick
you're going to
yourself.
use it.
You're going to use it. And actually, I will say that there is one of those deleted scenes that I did end up going back and using after I started working with an editor. She said, what about a scene that shows Ronnie and her grandmother? I can't remember the exact detail, but she suggests this, and I'm like, I have that scene. And so that was really cool to go back to my deleted file and retrieve that scene and put it into the book. So yes, I would say that this was a joy, and it was a real joy, especially to be working with a writers group that I trusted so much. And then I also met Lisa Weimer, who is an amazing writer, and she recently wrote a book called The Assignment that is just beautiful. And she was a critique partner, and she also helped me with a ton of streamlining and gave me so many ideas for one of her ideas actually for the revision of it was to change it from past tense to present tense, which is again oh my God, that is such a painful thing to do. Go back to the beginning and change everything to present tense. But she was so completely right about that feedback. And so I've had a lot of incredible people along the way to help me with that process of getting it ready for the world to read, and people outside of my little pod to read. So that was a story with
One of the, I'm kind of glancing at the chat questions from the audience, and somebody asked, is the first chapter of the book the initial short story? And I kind of laughed when I saw that, because it's so Annie didn't, the short story is not placed into the first chapter. She blew it wide open. The short story is kind of woven or sprinkled throughout this book, but it's definitely not it wasn't that easy. It was so much harder.
It wasn't that easy, but I will say that the climax scene, that's the same climax scene in the book.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the ending of that short story, but I don't think it was too different. I think I had in my mind pretty clearly what I wanted to happen by the end of the story. And so, but yeah, you're right. I had to, interweave it throughout. And but it was a really cool exercise in patience and also just perseverance. And again, it did feel like a little bit of a relief every time I would have time. If the kids were playing soccer, say, I would have my computer with me all the time and I would just sit in the van while they played and just use that hour. So throughout their childhood, really, I had this little special secret thing that I was doing, and it was meaningful.
So that's a good segue into one of my next questions, which is that you have teenagers slash young adult children now, but when you were working on it, they were little. So one of my favorite things about the book is Ronnie's voice. And I'm just wondering how you captured it. Like, how did you get into the head of an 18-year-old girl? Because it feels really authentic to me. I was like, skimming it. I read it a number of times, and I was skimming it again today. And I was just like amazed by how unforced it feels.
Yeah, Ronnie was a character that had been in my head somehow since high school. Like it really was a story that, I knew I needed to write. Sometimes people say, well, did you read a lot of YA? And that's another thing that I think people find interesting is that I actually didn't. And the reason I didn't is because it would really make me second guess myself and make me feel like, oh God, I don't know if I know what I'm doing. I don't even, why do I even try? That kind of like sort of the imposter syndrome, like questioning yourself,
Yeah.
feeling that self-doubt, that would really kick in when I was reading YA. So I would read adult fiction and I would go to my short stories. And it was somehow her voice though felt really real to me. She was such a well-formed character in my mind and had been there for a long time. So I'm not saying that like it was effortless. There were definitely times like I would bring it to the writing group and I would bring a scene and almost always like they would be able to tell that, wow, the voice seems a little off here. I mean, it's not like it was always seamless, as you know, but it was definitely she was just somebody who was kind of a part of my mind for a long time or had lived there for a while. And then I did finally, after I did the first draft, then I was able to read YA more and without feeling, like it was stymieing my process or whatever. So that's when I, started to feel like, okay, oh, here's a YA voice. And I like the way they did this in this YA. So I was able to sort of, braid through like certain elements of other voices that I'd read that I loved. But yeah, and the other thing I would say is I don't feel like I'm all of that different now than I was from when I was young. I mean, it's just funny. I came across like a trove of my old journals from upper high school. And reading my writing, they were just very detailed journals, in many of them too. I thought, God, I don't know that I would write something so different now. Like if I had to go through an experience similar to this, would I have the same kinds of thoughts? I mean, it was kind of eerie, actually. I'm like, gosh, have I not changed since high school? Like that's kind of creepy, but on the other hand, I feel like some of the elements that, some of the ways that I was back then are the way, it's similar to how I still think and feel about certain issues. So, maybe it wasn't such a leap in that sense in terms of embodying that teen voice. And again, also having teen kids helps a lot, especially with some of like the lexicon, some of the terminology. And I had the kids read my book to make sure that like, wow, does this feel stymied or stilted in any places? And they caught a few things. So that was helpful too.
I'm trying to remember, did you originally set it during like our teen years, or has it always been contemporary? I might have made that up.
It was always contemporary. Yeah, it was always, I didn't want to do it in the 80s and 90s. It just felt like some of the issues that I wanted to address in the book wouldn't have really been at the forefront of the 80s and 90s.
Right.
So I definitely wanted to, it was always meant to be a contemporary novel.
Okay, so that's another good segue, because you said in your description, and you just referenced the contemporary issues that you were addressing, you said that the story is about cross-cultural conflict within an interracial relationship. So that, to me, that is definitely the beating heart of this book. So can you talk a little bit more about this theme and why it felt so urgent to you as a writer? Just before you answer, I just want to say I feel like that's one of the things that made the short story so like wonderfully shocking and unusual. And I feel like that's something that really makes this book, you know, outstanding, in like amazing and wonderful, and also that it stands out from other books that I've read.
Oh, that I so appreciate you saying that. That is so okay. As much as I love like the love conquers all narrative that is so pervasive in YA and just kind of in fiction and in movies and in book, everywhere. Who doesn't love a great love story that is like, they end up walking off in the sunset and happily ever after. As much as I love that, I do feel like some of those early relationships can feel so volatile and fraught. And yet, I don't know. I felt like a lot of the stories that I had read didn't necessarily address that. And not to say that they aren't out there. I just personally hadn't read that many books that explored some of those aspects of relationships that are intense and filled with lots of love and passion, but there are sort of other things running through them, so I felt like that aspect is something I was just interested in from the standpoint of it felt realistic. um, Many young people don't end up with their high school boyfriend or girlfriend or significant other. So I was really interested also in this concept of escape. Like there are teens, I feel like when we were teens, of course, but even now, especially maybe more so now, I feel like teens are so under such scrutiny, really, and yet their identity, even their brains, they're all under construction, and so there's a lot of pressure. So how do you handle that pressure? Many of us would turn to some sort of an escape. So I was really interested in the idea of escapism into another person and into another person's world. So Ronnie, in her sense, I mean, from her standpoint, she has the South Asian community, she has a family that loves her, but it feels like there's pretty strict parameters for her. And she has these other interests, including art, and she frankly has always sort of longed for love. She has, experienced microaggressions. She grew up in like a predominantly white town, a very diverse town, and in a sense, and a town that kind of prides itself on its liberalism and progressivism, but still experienced quite a lot of microaggressions with relations to her culture. And so she's protective of herself, but she's also sort of has that sense feelings of sort of invisibility growing up. So Oliver shows an interest in her, and it's so easy to sort of escape into his world of art. And he's got this really diverse group of friends, and they're all like creative people, and she's sort of shocked at how much she has missed. She's a senior in high school, and for Oliver's part, he is so entranced with Ronnie and her culture and her family, and sort of treats that as well as an escape of his own. So that aspect of it felt so there was so much there to work with. There was so much built in tension and so much conflict that was sort of fun just as a writer, because there's sort of like endless possibilities. So I think that's kind of where it began. And then the interracial component of it felt like it was very much grounded in sort of the cultural conversation that we're having right now. First of all, we have a label for something as microaggressions, whereas growing up, we just sort of put up with some of those little comments and jabs. And if you ever said anything about those, you would be, people would say, wow, you really can't take a joke, or, I was just kidding, or wow, you're really oversensitive, or whatever. There wasn't that term of microaggressions that people, at least our young people have now. So I really wanted to just sort of lean into that and explore that a little bit more in the story.
Early in the book, like when they haven't even fallen in love yet, but Oliver kind of thinks he's complimenting Ronnie by calling her Princess Jasmine. and it happens really early in the book, and like it's clearly from Oliver's perspective just like a sweet thing to call her. And I don't even remember if she has a reaction at first, but it's sort of like you thread that through the book. He refers to her as Jazz or Princess Jasmine a few times, and like it's like a little homing signal throughout the book. Like, you know, their relationship is dismantled by the microaggressions that get kind of more and more macro as the book goes on. But like I just you know, the first time he refers to her as Princess Jasmine, I like gasped because, you know, you can imagine being 18 and thinking, well, that's sweet. And then like, you know, like quickly realizing that it's not sweet at all and that it's loaded and messed up. And I just thought that was really, I mean, it was really completely believable and authentic.
Yeah, that was something that I really worked hard with my editor on. We were trying to figure out like when does she realize that some of
Mhm.
these things are problems, so that was something we really had to almost look at like page number. Okay, when, at this point in the story, is she going to be paying close attention to that, or is she just going to get swept into the euphoria of, wow, this really charming, smart, artistic guy is showing an interest in me. So it was a really cool exercise in like story structure, actually, is
Mhm.
trying to figure out like how to seed that well and how to
Yeah.
slowly sort of unfurl it throughout. So yeah.
So, like I said, I'm kind of glancing at the chat questions as we talk. And so Bella just asked, can Anu talk a little bit about the research she had to do, or maybe she wouldn't call it research, but how she found the references that make the novel current, like the music, or for example, without giving it away, the job that Henry is into.
Oh, the job that Henry is into.
Yeah.
That's a good.
I laughed out loud when I read about his job.
Yes.
Well,
So
it's more like his hobby kind of.
hobby. Yes. Um, yeah. So some of that was, honestly, I never really sat down and like, I'm going to do research now. It's sort of like such an organic process. You're writing and then you're like, what could like Henry be into that's,
Mhm.
unusual? And that actually was something um that, my editor came up with. So that
Do you
was
want to do you want to say what it was for people who haven't read it yet?
yeah. So
Or you don't, I mean,
yeah, so he is into it's it's the word is plaka up, which is, I don't know if I want to go into all of it.
okay. You can read the book and find out that Henry's into
Yeah,
kind of a
I think that's
funky, cool,
it's hard
like
for me to explain it.
hobby.
Yes, yeah.
It felt very like, you know, of the moment.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so there were just definitely different things throughout that felt very wow, I don't really know what a teen who's kind of like this would be into. Let me look
Yeah.
it up. Let me ask some people. Oh, wow, I read this article and I really love, I could totally see, a character of mine being into that. So it was kind of, and again, since it took such a long time to write the story, I had a lot of different um, things that I came across in life. And, whether it be somebody that I talked to, a conversation or an article or a show or a movie or something that my kids say or whatever. So um, yeah, that's kind of an interesting question, Bella, in terms of, writing a story that feels very personal, like a lot of these issues were ones that I was really interested in as a kid myself. So I don't know if I needed to like sit down and do a huge amount of research beforehand, before the actual writing of it. Um,
And once you're in the moment, like I know this from my own research, like once you're writing, it can feel very like satisfying to do a little bit of research and then like pull that into your work. And I mean, in some ways it's almost like a historical fiction because you're not a teenager. So I mean, I think you can like find these moments that really like make the book feel alive for the reader. But can I ask you, can I move into onto another question? So
Absolutely.
I want to talk a little bit about Ronnie's family, which we've been mentioning. I love how you've portrayed them as so loving and supportive, but at the same time, so much cause for Ronnie's anxiety. I think that's really hard to do, to write about that kind of external conflict, but to still keep the intimate relationships in the family interesting. How did you do it? Or in other words, how did you create Ronnie's family as a force of conflict within the story while keeping the actual characters so sympathetic?
Yeah, I mean, it's a hard question to answer in a way because um first of all, the story went through so many iterations, so I feel like the first draft, Ronnie was a lot more frustrated with her family
Yeah.
in a way that was maybe kind of off-putting for maybe somebody who is South Asian reading it would go, oh my gosh, yes, I totally get her frustration. But if it's not somebody South Asian reading it, would they read it like she hates her culture or she hates her family? Maybe, like maybe they wouldn't have that understanding of the nuance of you don't know. And again, that's one of the scary things when you're thinking about representation, when you're writing and you're thinking about, okay, South Asian community, this is an opportunity that I have to be sharing about the South Asian community. So it took a few tries, like it took a few drafts for me to feel like this is where she strikes that balance where she loves her family, she's committed to elements of her family and their values, but she also is at odds with some of the things that they want from her or some of the ways that she is so limited, to not to be forbidden to date. And again, it's kind of understandable from their standpoint. They're like, okay, we have sacrificed a lot to immigrate to this country. We have come here for education, and you're going to take that education seriously and not waste time on things that aren't going to like end well, like young relationships often don't. And so it's like, in a sense, they kind of weren't wrong,
Right.
really think about what actually happens in the story. But on the other hand, you know, things like sexuality, that's such a healthy and normal part of our development. And so that was one thing I really wanted to do in the story. That was something that was important to me to explore, her exploring her sexuality as part of her identity. And she knew she wanted that, and especially after she met him and they had that sort of like deep connection, emotional connection, but also physical connection, which is so at odds with what her parents want for her at that stage in her life.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean, I wish I had a better answer for your question. It's such a good question.
That was such a good answer. But also I was thinking like even putting the topic of representation aside, just as a writer, I feel like it would have been so easy for you to make Ronnie just like, ugh, my family. But you created these beautiful characters, and like the tension comes from without, not so much from within, because I completely understood. I was kind of like on their side, like, Ronnie, just stop it, settle down, focus on your studies, your parents are right. But I mean, and it's not just because I don't think it's just because I'm that age, I think it was really like you really created these characters who their love for Ronnie was so clear and complex and multidimensional, and you did not take the easy way out, like you easily could have.
Yeah, I think
So
that having the grandmother come and visit them for an
yeah.
extended period of time while she was getting treatment for her arthritis, she was in a program in the United States and stayed with them for a good 9 months in the story. And so I think having that intergenerational component really helped from a family standpoint because
Mhm.
she, as it is so often with grandparents, they have a very different relation. They can have a very different relationship, a less fraught relationship with their grandchildren as compared to that child with their parents. So I think that grandmother in the story, the Aji, helped a lot with helping to bridge for Ronnie aspects of her culture that she feels at odds with, and her more American, girl, things that she was struggling with. Aji was sort of a nice bridge for her for that.
Mhm.
So
Um, okay, I really want to talk about this, and I feel like everybody who lays eyes on the book is wants to know too. Look at this gorgeous, gorgeous cover. Like really, I haven't seen a cover this breathtaking in a long time. So, and I know just because I've been with you on this journey that like the cover started out as something different. And um, can you talk a little bit about like how this came to be and like I don't know, I would if you're comfortable talk about how you advocated for it because it was a totally different cover. I'll just let you take it away.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad you brought up the cover. Yeah. So um, when we were first talking about covers, my editor and I and the team found an artist that we really liked, and we decided to, have her. We commissioned her to make a cover for American Betiya, and at the time, it was pretty. I want to say it was kind of early on in the process of the revisions. So she came up with a cover, and it was a girl facing outward. It was really beautiful art. It's vector art, which was it's beautiful, but somehow it looked a little bit young for what
What does that mean? What did you call it?
vector art, VECTOR. So it's a style of art it's kind of graphic art, and
Uh-huh.
so it's not it's not hand painted or anything. So it looked really contemporary. It was cool. It looked a little bit young for the story. And then as we kept doing the revisions and we realized, wow, some of these other themes, we need to bring out some of these other themes that were really quite adult themes, actually, within the story. And so this really happened throughout the revision process, working so closely with my editor. That's what I find is so interesting with those different drafts. Different things come up with each draft. And so we were sort of early in the process when we chose the cover, that earlier cover. And throughout the process of creating, going deeper in the story and understanding the themes on a more intimate level, we started to realize that, wow, that old cover, or that cover doesn't feel like it's a perfect fit for the story. It was still a beautiful cover, and I would have been happy with it, honestly. But I started around that time getting into Instagram because I felt like Twitter felt just too overwhelming for me to manage. And somebody told me, why don't you just give it, you love art and you love color. And so give Instagram a try. So at the time I didn't totally know how to use my Instagram. So all I was doing was discovering these beautiful artists through Instagram. They were posting their art and I was able to just follow them and suddenly see all this incredible artwork. And I came across an artist by the name of Sekiba Suleiman, and her art just blew me away. First of all, I was really interested in Kehinde Wiley's work. He features a lot of Black subjects with florals as the backdrop. And I was super drawn to that kind of artwork. And Sekiba Suleiman's work reminded me of that, except they featured South Asian women. And there was one in particular, which is now the cover, that just blew me away, and I couldn't stop looking at it. And I put it on my Instagram. Yes, it was that one. It was a painting that she had in a gallery in Pakistan. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is just stunning. So I put it on my Instagram with a little paragraph. And there was something about the girl that reminded me so much of Rani. And so that was in my little paragraph underneath my caption. And within an hour, I get an email from my editor saying, I just saw what you posted on Instagram. I went straight to my publisher to find out if we can swap out the cover for this one. It's not a commissioned piece because it's already a completed work of art. A million things can go wrong between now and then, but do I have your permission to swap out the cover for this one? And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I was so amazed at just that idea that this could be the cover. And so I said, yes, please. Oh my gosh, amazing. And within days, she wrote me and said, it's now going to be the cover. And it just felt, I did not know what kind of sorcery she was up to make that happen. I mean, I still feel just so, so grateful, because it does feel like a cover that fits the story, and fits some of the themes in a way that feels really just layered, and as compared to the other cover, which like I said, I loved that artist and I loved the work, but it felt a little bit young for what the story ended up being.
Yeah, this cover just captures the soul of the story in like a magical way.
It does.
I'm gonna feel free to ask questions in the chat. I'm kind of going through them, excuse me. What was I gonna ask you? Oh, well, let's talk about the title. I think it's unusual, and I need to drink some water. I think it's unusual and kind of it stands out to me that you chose to use a non-English word in the title. So while I choke, can you talk about how you came up with the title, and maybe if you like what your decision-making process was behind deciding to use a title that people wouldn't necessarily, that your like non-South Asian readership wouldn't necessarily understand immediately.
Yeah, it was definitely a risk. It's not like I've seen a lot of covers in the United States that have a non-English word in the title. I remember actually just texting you guys in the writing group. I remember texting specifically Liam Callahan, and we were just texting ridiculous titles back and forth, like off the wall, titles you would never use. And then I threw out there this title, and he was like, that one's perfect. So it was cool to just it was sort of one of those titles that I felt like captures her duality so well. She is, first of all, Betiya, meaning, its actual very meaning is that term of endearment for daughter. So it's like as if you would think of it as like darling, so it's like she's sort of like this darling in her family, and yet she's American. And so from the standpoint of sort of melding the two elements of her together within one title, it felt so perfect. But I was nervous, and so I shared the title with friends, and I shared it with Lisa Weimer, who is, as I mentioned, another critique partner that I really trust, and she was completely all over that title. She was like, absolutely, this is what you full force have got to like go with. And I mean, that's the wonderful thing about having critique partners and just people, authors, writers that you trust, because you do sort of feel like these works of art, these books that you write are so close to your heart that it's hard to have the distance and the perspective to make big decisions like this. So I was super grateful for all the support for Betiya, as the American Betiya is the title. And yeah, I loved that, that idea of her American part also being sort of the exploration of her freedom, her artistry, and love, something that her family really didn't condone, and really any of those things. So yeah, so that's how the title came about. And then actually right after Catherine, my editor, right after she acquired it, we had a conversation about the title. And I said, what do you think about the title? Do you feel like it's a risk? And, do you feel like it's something we need to talk about possibly changing? I just wanted to be open to it and just sort of prepare myself for the fact that we may not get that title. And she was like, you know what, if we can't use that title, then what are we even doing? That's what she said to me. And I
remember that.
That was just like such a beautiful, I mean, she was such an advocate, honestly, for my culture with this book in ways that I can't even describe how important that was to me. You hear about the publishing industry, and there's a lot of sort of rumblings about, the problems within the publishing industry. And I'm not saying that there aren't. I know that the publishing industry has a long way to go in terms of, publishing more books by, BIPOC authors. But to have that experience with Catherine meant so much to me, and so early on, where I was like not sure what I was doing and just wanted to make sure I did everything right, and to have her be like, nope, your instincts were right and we're sticking with them. So that was really meaningful.
That's excellent. That's beautiful. I'm going to ask you, so we're approaching 8 o'clock. So I'm going to ask you 2 more questions, and I'm going to skim the chat for any more questions, then we'll wrap it up. Does that sound good? So what do you, this is I actually hate this question, but what do you hope young readers will take away from your book? I just feel like, okay, I don't know. It's such a weird question to ask, because you don't write a book with the intent that you're going to like convey a message, but this book does deal with so many important and complex themes, and I feel like I can ask you this because it's a YA book. So so yeah, I'll just shut up. What do you hope young readers will take away from this book?
I love you. So I feel like, when you're writing a book, at least for me with this book, I didn't really know what the themes were. I didn't really know what I wanted somebody to take away from it. I was not focused on that at all. I was really focused on what are these issues, these cultural conflicts within intimate relationships. What is that all about? And that was something I was just trying to figure, it's like what Joan Didion says, which is, I write solely to understand what I'm thinking. I'm not going to be able to quote her perfectly, but I write to understand what I'm thinking about, what I fear, what I am. And that's what the story was for me. I really didn't know a lot of the answers to the questions I was asking. The writing was helping me figure that out. So I can look back now, though, at, now that it's a finished piece, I can say, I really hope to, that people would like find the space to discover and embrace their identity the way Ronnie was able to through Oliver. And people, some reviewers and readers have said, oh, Oliver, he was such a flawed character. And he was, and he is, but it does also feel like he helped on some level. He helped her to find her voice, which is what we find sometimes in relationships, whether they're positive or negative. There are always positive things in every relationship. And there are negative elements in every relationship. And so I would hope that young people reading would be able to, or older people reading, would be able to sort of discover and embrace their identity through their relationships. And also to be able to better recognize some of the signs in their relationships that feel like red flags. There's a reason that there is the adage, love is blind, because when you are in the throes of love, you may not recognize those signals that show that things are not quite right here, and this maybe isn't serving me the way I think it is. So when things start to feel compromising, maybe readers would be able to recognize that better after reading a story like this. And then finally, I guess I would say, like there are times that there are no witnesses to like oppressive moments in our lives, whether it's a microaggression or a macroaggression. Sometimes it's just you and one person there. And it's not like, oh, somebody yelling across the street, some racial slur. I mean, that happens, but a lot of times it's much more nuanced and layered than that. And so I guess I would really hope that people would recognize that even though it's just you and another person and there's no one else to stand up for you and speak out on your behalf, that you can do that on your own behalf, that you have that strength within you. And you may not always have that strength right away, but hopefully seeing the way Ronnie sort of built up that strength through the help of her best friend, Kate, who is this like fierce advocate of her, who is like one of the best friends. And I was channeling all my beautiful best friends. I have so many great friends. And honestly, there's a little bit of all of you in Kate, and in Ronnie, really, but because of how much strength we really can harness from those like beautiful people in our lives, whether that's family or friends. Even if they're not right by your side, that they're there. And so they give you the strength to be able to face these situations where you are being there is a dysfunction at play. So I think that's what would be my answer.
Just like your book, you made me cry at the beginning and at the end of this conversation. You also made your editor weep, according to the comments. She was when you were talking about the title. Okay, this is my last question, and yeah, we should probably wrap it up. What are you reading right now? Because everybody wants to know what you're reading and what you would recommend.
Oh my gosh. So I usually read like 3 or 4 titles, maybe even more, but I'm going to not be crazy and just share a couple. So this is the book that I was talking about before, The Assignment by Lisa Weimer. It came out in August. It is a stunning book. It is really beautifully written. It's about 2 teens who they stand up against an assignment that their teacher gives them, a beloved teacher, by the way. This is a true story. It's based on a true story. And it is an assignment where they are asked to debate against, like on behalf of the Nazis, and the other half of the class debates against the Nazis. And it's just a completely reprehensible assignment that actually this kind of happens with much more regularity than we think. Anyway, it's just a stunning book and I love it. And I love everything actually that Lisa has written. And then the other book that I'm like super excited about too it's called Gold Diggers by Sanjana Sathian, I hope I'm saying that right. I am going to be able to moderate this when Sanjana comes to Boswell in May. So I'm super excited because it's been one of my dreams to be moderating and be in conversation with an author. And so I'm loving this book right now. I just started it.
Okay, well, Daniel, come back. He said to call him when we were finished, but oh, there he is.
Yes.
Annie, this has just been such an incredible honor and pleasure.
This has been an incredible honor and pleasure and a dream, like a long time dream. And to have Daniel here, how many events I've come and just always thought, I wonder when my time is coming. So this means so much to me. And thank you to my agent. I wanted to say thank you so much to my amazing agent, Alex Slater, and also Catherine Harrison, my editor, who I've already gushed about, and Olive Knopf, and all of my friends and my family. You guys have just, I would not be here without you. I really, your support and your love is everything. So thank you.
You're getting a lot of love. I just want to say how wonderful this is, and how one of the really exciting moments of a bookseller in retrospect is when someone kind of walks up to you and introduces yourself and like, I'm kind of working on a book someday. It's so distinct in my head when I met you. So, and it's so great to see it come to fruition. So congratulations on your success. And we're all thrilled for you. So.
Thank you guys. This was amazing. Thank you guys so much. This was seriously the biggest, just a dream of a lifetime, honestly.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, Anuradha. Yay.
Thanks. Yay.
Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.